Chart attachment begins quietly. It does not feel like obsession at first. It feels like attention. It feels like focus. It feels like you are being patient with a trade that deserves patience. You find a setup, you study it, you watch the candles form, and slowly the chart stops being a chart. It becomes a story. And once a trade becomes a story, you are no longer seeing it clearly. This is one of the most dangerous psychological traps in trading because it feels intelligent while it is happening. You are not clicking randomly. You are not revenge trading openly. You are not throwing your account into the market with no thought. You are analyzing. You are building a case. You are collecting reasons. You are convincing yourself that this trade matters. But that is exactly where the danger begins. Because the market does not care about the story you built around a trade. It does not care how long you watched it. It does not care how clean it looked 10 minutes ago. It does not care how much sense it made when you first marked it. The market only shows what is happening now. And if you are attached to what you wanted to happen, you will miss what is actually happening. This is why chart attachment destroys traders so quietly. It does not feel emotional. It feels like conviction. You stare at the same setup for too long. You keep looking at the same level, the same zone, the same structure, the same possible move. At first, you are observing. Then you begin anticipating. Then you begin expecting. And once expectation enters, neutrality leaves. Now, the trade is no longer just one opportunity among many. It becomes your trade, your idea, your prediction, your proof that you understood the market. And when a setup becomes connected to your identity, you stop managing risk and start defending a belief. That is the moment the chart owns you. Most traders think attachment begins after entry. They think the emotional problem starts only when money is involved. But many times, attachment begins before the trade is even taken. It begins while you are watching. It begins while you are waiting. It begins when you spend so much mental energy building a case for the trade that walking away starts to feel like wasting all that effort. You have already invested attention. You have already invested emotion. You have already imagined the outcome. And even though you have not entered yet, part of you already feels involved. This is why you can become attached to a trade before risking a single dollar. Your mind has already entered before your account has. This is why missed trades hurt. This is why invalidated setups feel personal. This is why you sometimes take entries, are no longer clean because you are not only reacting to price, you are reacting to the time and emotion you already invested in the idea. The chart becomes familiar, and familiarity feels like trust. But familiarity is not edge. The fact that you watched a setup for 30 minutes does not make it stronger. The fact that you drew the zone yourself does not make it more valid. The fact that price came close to your level 3 times does not mean it owes you a reaction. The market does not reward emotional ownership. It rewards clear execution. But attachment makes clear execution difficult. Because once you fall in love with a trade, you begin filtering information. You notice everything that supports your idea. You ignore everything that challenges it. A candle against you becomes a fake out. A shift in momentum becomes noise. A broken level becomes a liquidity grab. Every warning sign gets reinterpreted as another reason to stay loyal to the original idea. This is not analysis anymore. This is defense. And the mind, it is very good at defending what it wants to believe. It can turn doubt into patience. It can turn fear into conviction. It can turn a broken trade into a trade that just needs more time. That is why attachment is so dangerous. It does not announce itself as emotion. It disguises itself as logic. You tell yourself you are giving the trade room. But sometimes, you are giving your ego room. You tell yourself you are trusting your analysis. But sometimes you are refusing to admit that the analysis changed. You tell yourself you are being patient, but sometimes you are simply unable to let go. This is the difference most traders never learn. Patience is staying with a valid plan. Attachment is staying with an invalidated desire. Patience is calm. Attachment is tense. Patience accepts uncertainty. Attachment demands that the market eventually prove you right. And the market is brutal with traders who demand to be proven, right? Because it will let you build the story. It will let you feel confident. It will let you imagine the perfect move. And then it will move without asking permission. It will break your level. It will change structure. It will show you new information. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can update or you can defend. Most traders defend. They keep watching the same idea even after the market has moved on. They adjust the lines slightly. They expand the zone. They give it more room. They say the setup is still valid because the bigger picture still makes sense. But what they are really doing is protecting the emotional investment they made in the trade. They are trying to avoid the pain of being wrong. And that pain is the heart of chart attachment. Because falling in love with a trade is rarely about the trade itself. It is about what the trade represents. It represents your skill, your patience, your ability to read the market, your hope of recovering from the last loss, your desire to finally catch the move cleanly, your need to prove that you're not confused anymore. So when the trade fails, it does not just feel like a setup failed. It feels like you failed. That is why you hold longer than planned. That is why you move the stop. That is why you ignore the exit. That is why you keep staring after the trade is already dead. You are not watching price anymore. You are waiting for emotional relief. Before we dive deeper, let me ask you this. Are you tired of entering trades with a clear plan, then slowly losing control the moment the chart starts challenging your idea? Are you tired of moving stop losses, second guessing exits, or staying in bad trades because you cannot detach from the setup you believed in? That is exactly why I created my ebook, Master Your Mind, Master Your Trades. It breaks down the mental traps that make traders inconsistent: fear, hesitation, overtrading, revenge trading, and the hidden attachment that makes you defend losing positions. If you want to understand your psychology and build the discipline to trade with a clear mind, check the link in the description. Now, let's continue. The first thing you must understand is that attachment grows from attention without boundaries. Attention is necessary. You need to observe the market. You need to study your setups. You need to wait for conditions. But when attention has no boundary, it becomes emotional involvement. You watch too closely. You check too often. You replay the same idea again and again until the chart begins to feel personal. This is why some traders become emotionally attached before entry. They sit in front of the screen for hours, waiting for one specific thing to happen. They tell themselves they are being disciplined, but inside, they are slowly narrowing their world down to one outcome. The longer they wait, the more they feel the trade should happen. The more they feel it should happen, the harder it becomes to accept when it does not. Time creates weight. The more time you spend watching one idea, the heavier it becomes in your mind. And once it feels heavy, letting go feels like loss. Not financial loss, psychological loss. You feel like you wasted your patience. You wasted your focus. You wasted the opportunity. So instead of letting the setup go, you force meaning into it. This is how traders enter late. They had a clean plan. Price did not trigger it properly. The setup changed. The conditions weakened. But because they watched it for so long, they still want something from it. So they take a compromise entry. Not because the criteria are complete, but because walking away feels unbearable. That is not discipline. That is attachment, collecting payment. Every emotional investment demands a return. If you invest too much attention into a trade, your mind wants to be rewarded for that attention. It wants the market to pay you for waiting. It wants the setup to complete because you were patient. But the market does not pay for waiting. It pays for correct execution when valid conditions appear. Waiting by itself is not virtue. Waiting with attachment is just delayed impulsiveness. You can sit still for 2 hours and still be emotionally uncontrolled. You can avoid clicking and still be trapped. Because discipline is not measured by how long you stare at the screen. Discipline is measured by whether you can leave when the reason to stay disappears. That is the real test. Not whether you can enter, whether you can detach. A professional trader can study a setup deeply and still walk away instantly when it invalidates. An amateur studies a setup deeply and begins to feel entitled to it. That entitlement is subtle. It sounds like this trade has to work. It looks too clean. It has to reverse here. It has to break out now. It cannot fail after forming like this. The words may never be spoken out loud, but the feeling is there. The market owes me this. And the moment you feel the market owes you anything, you are no longer trading, you are negotiating with reality. Reality does not negotiate. The chart either confirms or it does not. The level either holds or it does not. The setup either remains valid or it does not. Your job is not to convince the market to fit your idea. Your job is to stay available to the truth as it changes. But attachment closes your eyes. It makes you loyal to the first interpretation. And the first interpretation is not always wrong, but it is never sacred. A chart is not a promise. A setup is not a contract. A level is not a guarantee. It is simply information in motion. The trader who survives understands that information must be updated. The trader who struggles keeps worshiping old information. That is what chart attachment really is. Worshipping old information because it once made you feel certain. You saw something, it made sense, it gave you confidence, and instead of treating that confidence as temporary, you turned it into a position in your mind. Then, when new candles appeared, you judged them based on whether they supported the old idea. If they did, you welcomed them. If they did not, you explained them away. This is confirmation bias in its most expensive form. You do not just look for evidence, you look for emotional permission to stay attached. You see one small reaction at your level and feel relief. You see a candle slow down and call it rejection. You see a minor pullback and call it confirmation. Meanwhile, the larger picture may be weakening right in front of you. But because you are attached, you are not reading the chart. You are searching for comfort. Comfort is dangerous in trading, because the trade that comforts you is often the trade that has already captured your mind. It feels safe because it is familiar. It feels strong because you have repeated the story many times. It feels obvious because you have removed the evidence that makes it uncertain. But profitable trading, you know, it is not about feeling comfortable, it is about staying accurate. And accuracy, well, it requires detachment. You must be able to say, this was my idea, and now the market is showing something else. You must be able to say, this looked valid 10 minutes ago, but it does not look valid now. 是不话. You must be able to say, I wanted this trade, but wanting it is not enough. That sentence can save an account. Wanting it is not enough. Most traders lose money because they treat wanting as evidence. They want the reversal, so they see reversal signs. They want the breakout, so they see strength. They want the trade to come back, so they see hope. The chart becomes a mirror, not a map. It reflects their desire back to them. And when the chart becomes a mirror, you stop seeing the market, you start seeing yourself. You see your impatience, your hope, your frustration, your need to be right, your fear of missing out, your memory of the last loss, your fantasy of the next win, all of it appears on the screen disguised as analysis. That is why two traders can look at the same chart and see completely different things. One is reading information, the other is reading attachment. The difference is not intelligence, it is emotional distance. The more emotionally distant you are from an idea, the more clearly you can evaluate it. The more attached you are, the more your mind bends the evidence to protect the story. This is why traders can explain losing trades so beautifully. They can describe every reason it made sense, every signal, every confluence, every narrative, but they cannot answer the simplest question. When did it stop being valid? That question exposes everything, because attached traders rarely have a clear answer. They keep moving the moment of invalidation further away. First, it was this level, then it was the next level, then it was the higher time frame, then it was the bigger picture. The line keeps moving because the mind does not want closure. Closure means the story is over, and attached traders hate endings. They want one more candle, one more retest, one more reaction, one more chance. They call it patience, but it is emotional bargaining. The trade is already showing weakness, but they are still asking it to become the trade they imagined. This is how small losses become larger losses. Not because the trader did not know where the stop should be, but because the stop represented an emotional ending. It meant the idea was wrong. It meant the story failed. It meant they had to release the trade, and release feels painful when you have fallen in love with the idea. So they move it just a little, they give it room, just this once, they wait just one more candle, and with every small compromise, they teach themselves that attachment is allowed to override discipline. This is how accounts are damaged. Not in one dramatic moment, but in a series of tiny betrayals. You betray your plan by one candle, then by one level, then by one excuse, then by one hope, and eventually the loss is no longer controlled by your system. It is controlled by your inability to detach. The cruel truth is this: a trade does not need your loyalty, your discipline does. You owe loyalty to your rules, not your prediction. You owe loyalty to your risk, not your opinion. You owe loyalty to your future self, not the version of you that wanted this one trade to work. That shift changes everything. Because when your loyalty moves from the trade to the process, attachment loses power. You stop asking, how can this still work? You start asking, is this still valid? You stop asking, what if it comes back? You start asking, what did my plan require? You stop asking, how do I avoid being wrong? You start asking, how do I protect my consistency? Well, that is the professional question. How do I protect my consistency? Not how do I save this trade? Not how do I recover this loss? Not how do I prove I was right? How do I protect the behavior that allows me to survive long enough for edge to matter? Most traders never ask that question in the moment. They ask emotional question. Why is this happening to me? Why did it reverse after I entered? Why does the market always do this? Should I hold? Should I give it more room? Should I wait for the next candle? The questions are frantic because the attachment is strong. But when you are detached, the question becomes simple. Did the trade meet the plan? Is the trade still within the plan? If yes, continue. If no, exit or stay out. No drama, no story, no emotional court case. This simplicity feels boring, but boring is where discipline lives. You do not need a romantic relationship with your trades. You need a clean relationship with your rules. Every trade should be replaceable. Every setup should be one of many. Every idea should be disposable the moment the market disproves it. Disposable does not mean careless. It means free. Free from needing this trade to work. Free from needing this idea to prove your intelligence. Free from needing the market to validate your analysis. Free from the emotional weight that makes one setup feel like your future. One trade is not your future. One chart is not your identity. One setup is not the final test of your ability, but attachment makes it feel that way. It compresses your entire trading journey into one decision. It makes a single trade feel bigger than it is. And when one trade feels too big, your behavior becomes too emotional. That is why position size matters psychologically, not just financially when a trade is too large. Attachment becomes easier. You watch every tick. You interpret every candle. You feel every movement in your body. The trade becomes impossible to ignore because the risk is emotionally loud. But even with small size, attachment can appear if your identity is involved. That is why the deeper solution is not only reducing risk, it is reducing emotional ownership. You must stop treating ideas like possessions. You do not own a setup. You borrow an idea from the market for as long as the evidence supports it. When the evidence disappears, you return it. No argument, no grief, no bargaining. This is what clean trading feels like. It is not emotionless. You may still feel disappointment. You may still feel tension. You may still want the trade to work. But those feelings no longer control the decision. They appear, and you continue following the plan anyway. That is discipline, not the absence of desire, the mastery of desire. Because desire will always be there. You will always want the trade to work. You will always want to catch the move. You will always want to be right. The goal is not to kill that desire. The goal is to stop obeying it. When you obey desire, you chase. When you obey attachment, you hold. When you obey fear, you exit early. When you obey discipline, you follow the plan. Every trade reveals which voice has authority in you. This is why chart attachment is such a powerful teacher. It shows you where your emotional loyalty really is. Are you loyal to truth? Or are you loyal to your prediction? Are you loyal to your plan? Or are you loyal to your need to feel right? Are you loyal to consistency? Or are you loyal to the emotional relief of seeing one trade come back? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary. Because until you can admit that you sometimes fall in love with trades, you will keep calling attachment by better names. You will call it conviction. You will call it patience. You will call it confidence. You will call it experience. But underneath those words, the same pattern remains. You cannot let go when the trade stops making sense. That is the pattern to break. So the next time you feel yourself falling in love with a trade, pause. Ask the question that cuts through the story. If I had never watched this chart before, would I still want this trade right now? If the answer is yes, follow your plan. If the answer is no, let it go. Not because you are weak, not because you are scared, because you are loyal to truth over desire. The trade can matter, but it cannot matter more than your discipline. Are you trading the chart in front of you, or are you defending the story you fell in love with?